FedEx Flight 705.
Positive rate.
Gear up, please.
A routine trip from Memphis, Tennessee to San Jose, California. Little do the crew know they will soon have to defend themselves against a determined attack intended to kill them all. Flight 705 will never reach its destination.
We've had an attempt to take over.
Investigators will uncover a meticulous plan and a desperate motive.
3,000?
We're not getting any oxygen. We have the terrain alarm. Aero Peru 603. We are in an emergency.
It's April 1994. A FedEx cargo plane is on its way to California. It's a perfect day for flying.
Altimeters?
9s and 2s here.
But behind the cockpit, in the galley area, a disaster is about to unfold. The pilots of FedEx Flight 705 are seconds away from an unprecedented situation.
God almighty.
Center emergency.
He's had an attempted takeover.
We need an ambulance, and we need armed intervention.
Let me up.
April the 7th, 1994. Worldwide headquarters of Federal Express in Memphis, Tennessee. Servicing 171 countries, the company delivers over 2 million packages per day and works to a tight schedule. Flying conditions are perfect at the Memphis airport. FedEx Flight 705 to San Jose, California is preparing to depart with a 3-man crew.
Has the afternoon's flight to San Jose got any jump seaters on it? None at all?
42-year-old Auburn Calloway is a flight engineer. He hopes to hitch a ride on Flight 705 for pressing personal reasons.
Thanks.
Employees have the privilege of free rides. They're known as jump seaters. 39-year-old flight engineer Andy Peterson is the first of the flight crew to arrive on the plane.
Andy Peterson.
Auburn Calloway.
He's surprised to find Auburn Calloway on board.
My first thought was, well, scheduling has gotten, it's also called someone else out for the flight, and now we've got 2 engineers, so I said hey to him and then asked him if he was going to be riding out to San Jose with us, and he said he was, that he was going to ride the jump seat out.
Peterson, a 5-year flyer with FedEx, finds something unusual during his pre-flight check. The breaker switch of the cockpit voice recorder, or CVR, is in the off position. Puzzled, Peterson resets it. The CVR records all in-flight voice communications. It's a crucial tool for investigating air disasters. No large commercial airliner is allowed to fly without one.
The cockpit voice circuit breaker, it had popped out, which means the power's off to the cockpit voice recorder. So I'd never seen that before, and I thought, well, that's kind of weird.
49-year-old pilot David Sanders and 42-year-old co-pilot James Tucker are next to board and prepare for departure.
Calloway. You mind if I hop around with you guys, California?
No, not at all. I don't see any problems today. Everything looks good.
You play the guitar?
I play at it.
He was very cool, calm, collected, nothing indicating anything was amiss. Actually noticing there was a guitar case off to the right in front of the 9G net. But I couldn't wait to get in the cockpit and start going through cockpit checks because we had a lot to do.
But something was amiss. They didn't know it, but Calloway had originally been scheduled to be the flight engineer on this flight. However, he and his crew had exceeded their flying hours by just 1 minute the previous day, so they'd been replaced. But Calloway was determined to make Flight 705 no matter what.
I think she'll fly.
All the nuts and bolts are in?
Yeah.
When I came back out on the airplane and went back up to the cockpit, I noticed that circuit breaker had popped out again. So I reset it and decided that I would see if it would stay in instead of calling maintenance at that time, that I'd just wait and see if it popped back out, that I would call maintenance, because that is a no-go item.
If the CVR is turned off, there will be no audio record of the events aboard Flight 705.
You want to fly this leg of the trip, or do you prefer the return trip?
You never know when you're going to get another chance.
I met Jim Tucker that afternoon. Jim had been with the company for 10 years. In fact, he was an instructor in the DC-10. Andy Peterson and I had a trip together. In fact, we flew to Paris one time.
The crew is flying together for the first time. Both Tucker and Sanders are ex-Navy. Sanders has been with FedEx for 20 years. James Tucker, who has a wife and 3 children at home, has been with the company for 10 years. None of the crew know Callaway or his reasons for being on this flight.
Express 705, heavy runway 27, clear for takeoff.
Express 705 cleared for takeoff. Lights if you want them. I mean clocks if you want them. Lights are coming on. We'll get the vertical speed wheel here in a minute.
How's the checklist look?
All right, before takeoff is complete.
Your airplane?
Set standard power, please, before they change their mind.
Power is set. Knots.
That checks.
V1, rotate. Positive rate.
Gear up, please.
FedEx Flight 705 is airborne and westward bound. The weather to California is clear, and if all goes as planned, they'll be back home within 10 hours. But back in the cargo area, Auburn Callaway is launching a different plan. A plan he's been shaping and reshaping for several days. Like the brilliant chess player he is, Callaway has thought out all his moves. Being bounced from the crew of Flight 705 today was an unexpected glitch, but nothing he can't cope with.
Are you declaring an emergency, sir?
Watch all episodes of Ice Pilots. Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required. Download Veely now.
At his home that morning, Callaway already had to make a small adjustment to his plans. The flight bag he'd planned to take with him on his journey is in for repairs, so instead he packs a guitar case. As a company employee, he's unlikely to be searched, and a guitar case seems innocent enough.
Here you have a man who made some accomplishments that no other African American had ever made.
Callaway graduated from Stanford University in 1974. He became a top Navy flyer, then a commercial pilot, but his 5 years at FedEx have been as a flight engineer.
He was highly intelligent, a driven person to accomplish goals, and had before him an opportunity of a tremendously positive career. He was married and had children and family, and it just seemed as though he was almost part of the true American dream, just about the American family.
Before leaving for the airport, Callaway put some important documents on his bed. Among them, his last will and testament. FedEx Flight 705 is several minutes outside Memphis, still climbing and passing through 5,800 meters. Jim Tucker is hand-flying the airplane, using control wheel steering mode and enjoying the clear afternoon skies. A couple of meters away sits Auburn Callaway. Behind him lie frustrated expectations of a brilliant career and a marriage that ended in tears.
Altimeters? 9s and 2s here.
After takeoff is complete.
Calloway has a terrifying plan. His guitar case is packed with several hammers and a spear gun. Out of sight of the crew, he gets his weapons ready. To be successful, Calloway will have to act quickly. Speed and strength will be critical. Calloway is a former Navy pilot and a martial arts expert, so speed and strength come as part of the package.
The original plan was to take out his original crew, which would have only been 2 individuals. One was a female, much smaller than the crew that he wound up facing on Flight 705.
No, I live in Fisherville.
Fisherville. Great spot.
I had the cockpit door locked open. I noticed that Calloway was walking up into the cockpit. I just caught him out of the corner of my eye and basically saw his, his arm coming up. And I thought, well, he's just coming up to sit and talk with us for a while.
Excruciating pain, blinding pain. So much, in fact, that I never lost consciousness, but I lost useful consciousness for at least 45 seconds.
A blow to the head will rattle the brain. It will shake it enough that the electrical connections momentarily are not working, and it can be anywhere from a complete, irretrievable loss of consciousness to simply a stun, or to what he describes as a period of time where he was somewhat aware of what was going on, but could not respond to it.
I was slumped back like this, and he looked, I remember, right in my eyes as he passed over. It was almost probably like, well, the lights are on, but there's nobody home here. This guy is out of action, so I'll move on to the next person.
The crew is in shock and confused.
What I saw was simply a face in his eyes and an object coming down at me. I didn't discern any emotion or hate or anger. I just saw a threat, and I didn't really know what the threat was, because it's so shocking. And for a crew member who is a pilot in uniform to attack another pilot is unheard of in the airline industry.
Although terribly injured, Peterson and Tucker are still alive.
Get him! Get him! Get him!
Calloway hurriedly retreats out of the cockpit. Unaware of each other's injuries, the crew starts to mobilize. Calloway has a backup plan. The spear gun stashed outside the cockpit is a deadly weapon.
Sit down! Sit down! Get back to your seats! This is a real gun, and I'll kill you!
There was a loud ringing in my ear, and I was a little unbalanced. But I saw this spear gun, and I thought, well, the only thing I can do is try to grab it. So I grabbed the spear. It sticks out of the spear gun about, 4 inches or so. So I grabbed it right behind the barbs and tried to hang on to it real tight.
Tucker does something that Calloway is not expecting. He pulls back the yoke and puts the plane into a sudden 15-degree climb. It throws the struggling men out of the cockpit into the galley behind.
I had already figured out that what I had in my hands is probably one of the best weapons available, and that was the aircraft itself.
Tucker has not been just a Navy pilot, but a combat instructor flying A-4s. His fighter pilot experience would prove invaluable in the next few minutes.
I was looking at this whole situation as if it was an air combat maneuvering situation.
Get him!
We're taught in the Navy and in the fighter community is the first thing you want to do is engage the bogey, and engage the bad guy. You make him predictable by engaging him, and you use his predictability then against him, and then you kill the bogey.
Get him! Get him! Get him!
But the co-pilot doesn't stop there. Tucker immediately rolls the massive aircraft to the left in an acrobatic maneuver to try and disarm Calloway. The men roll along the smoke curtain to the left side of the plane.
I knew that I had to do something very abrupt, very, very rough, and something that he would not be expecting.
Tucker has no idea whether rolling the plane is helping Sanders and Peterson as they try to restrain Calloway. The fight continues with the men pinned to the left side of the plane. The crew members are rapidly losing blood and strength. Tucker continues to execute the roll, all the while trying to maintain a visual reference outside the captain's window.
Get him, Andy, I got the airplane.
So you roll the airplane over on its back and pull through completely in the vertical. But at this particular point, you know, if I'd rolled the airplane over on its back, I wouldn't really be able to see what I was doing. This is not a bubble canopy that you have over the top. You're actually looking out. It's got expansive windows, but nonetheless, you roll this airplane over on its back, you can't really see that much of what you're doing. So I rolled it to about 140 degrees where I could still see out over the side as the airplane's nose was starting to come through.
Tucker rolls the 250,000 kilogram DC-10 to 140 degrees, almost on its back. Commercial aircraft are never meant to roll more than 60 degrees. The men continue their fight on the ceiling of the aircraft. Calloway wrenches the hammer in his hand free and hits Sanders in the head. Tucker decides to pull back on the yoke and put the plane into a steep dive, a risky but cunning move. The G-force of the dive pushes the men back along the ceiling to the smoke curtain. The plane is traveling at a very dangerous speed. Tucker is making demands of the aircraft for which it was not designed. DC-10s are never meant to be flown past 695 kilometers per hour. Tucker is over 800 kilometers per hour. No DC-10 in history has been flown so fast and survived.
The airspeed indicator was maxed. It was all the way to what we call the barber pole. Couldn't go any faster, but you could tell that you were going quite a bit faster because of things you don't normally hear in a jet that size, and one is the incredible amounts of sound of wind coming across the cockpit.
The plane approaches supersonic speed. With the increased airspeed, the airflow over the stabilizer becomes disrupted. The elevators begin to flutter back and forth. If the flutter becomes more pronounced, they may become inoperable, and Tucker will no longer have the means to pull the plane out of the dive.
If I didn't pull out soon, the airplane was probably going to come apart because I was getting into a phenomenon known as Mach tuck, where the airplane is pitching over because the airspeed is increasing so much. The wind flow over the surfaces of the wings is doing things that it's not even designed to do.
The injury to the left side of Tucker's brain is beginning to paralyze functions on the right side of his body. Tucker notices something alarming. The plane is traveling at this incredible speed because the throttle levers have been left in their automatic climb setting from takeoff. The DC-10 is now in a vertical dive with the engines at nearly full power. Tucker must release his only usable hand from the yoke to pull back on the throttles. With power reduced to idle, the DC-10 is still not out of danger. Despite Tucker's maneuvers, Calloway is gaining the upper hand.
Calloway hit me with the third blow, which was in the top of my head, nearly rendered me unconscious. I began to gray out. At that very same time, it occurred to me we might lose this thing.
As Tucker starts to pull the plane carefully out of the dive, the elevator flutter increases. Balance panels, counterweights that help the pilots manipulate the elevator, break free and begin to wrinkle the skin of the stabilizer. Tucker fears that if he pulls back too hard during the dive, all the surfaces on the tail section would be in danger of coming off. Sanders' strength is nearly spent, and Peterson's head is bleeding profusely from his ruptured temporal artery. Somehow they manage to pin their attacker down.
The G-forces began to be reduced as he began to level off from pulling out of the dive. I saw the hammer in Calloway's hand. I then reached for the hammer with both my hands and pulled the hammer out of his hand.
Sanders believes this is a turning point. The plane is safe for the moment. About a minute after the attack begins, Tucker finally has a chance to radio Memphis.
Center emergency.
Air traffic controller Kent Fleshman and his trainee receive Tucker's emergency request.
Aircraft with emergency, say again.
Center.
Aircraft with emergency, say again.
Listen to me.
It's Express 705. I've been wounded. We've had an attempt to take over and
Aboard the airplane. Give me a vector, please. Back to Memphis at this time. Hurry.
Express 705, fly heading 095, direct Memphis.
095.
direct to Memphis. Get me an ambulance and alert the airport facility.
Hey, Memphis, you still with me?
Affirmative 705, descend and maintain 10,000.
Fleshman takes action in case the hijacker has a gun. If he can get the plane below 3,000 meters, a bullet hole in the fuselage will not cause explosive decompression. Tucker hears the fight increase in the galley. Again, he uses his only weapon, the aircraft. The maneuver throws the men onto the side of the plane.
Let go of the spear!
Look, just keep talking to me, okay?
Express 705, affirmative. If you need an ambulance, stand by and we'll get that for you.
Yeah, we need an ambulance, and
we need armed intervention as well.
Make sure and notify the SWAT team he's asking for armed intervention.
Fleshman recognizes the term armed intervention as the most serious request from a pilot. It means they want armed officials to storm the plane upon landing. Memphis approach has to be alerted.
We have an emergency, Express 705. He's had an attempted takeover on the aircraft.
He's had an attempted takeover. Okay. Radar contact, put him on 119.1.
Paul Candelino, a 44-year-old veteran controller, now spots Flight 705 on his radar screen. But something's wrong. The plane is heading away from the airport. It looks like the hijacker has seized the plane. The crew of FedEx Flight 705 has been attacked by a co-worker and have declared an emergency.
Intervention.
Air traffic control watches helplessly as they fly away from the airport, while the fight for control of the plane continues. Co-pilot James Tucker is pushing the DC-10, his best weapon, to its limits. He now throws the wheel round, flipping the massive plane in the opposite direction. Tucker, drawing on his military experience, reverses the role, keeping his maneuvers unpredictable.
Here I am, all alone in the cockpit. The fight is still going on in the back. I don't know who's winning, I don't know who's losing. And that was about the only time I really had time to be frightened. And it was a very horrifying situation at that point, thinking that quite possibly Auburn was winning.
3.5 minutes after the attack, though pinned and injured, Auburn Calloway will not relinquish the spear.
The anger was coming in then, and so when I hit him, it was with the intent to disable him and eliminate his ability to fight. Not kill, but to injure him sufficiently that he could fight no more. So when I swung the hammer, it was with all the strength that I had.
Sanders and Peterson momentarily subdue Calloway.
Put it on autopilot. Hey, get back here.
The captain's yelling at Tucker to come and help, but he's the one flying the plane.
Express 705.
I've contact Memphis approach on 119.1. They are aware of your emergency.
Jim, quick, Jim.
Request a single frequency approach.
Single frequency approach, roger. We'll pass that along. 119.1. Put it on autopilot.
Come on, Jim, quick.
Get back here.
But you have to understand that that's probably the strangest request that I've ever had, come my way, because here I am, the only one up front in the cockpit now, and for me to go ahead and get up and go to the back means I've got to First of all, stand up, which I didn't know until the particular time when I tried to stand up. It was very, very difficult to do so.
Jim Tucker, with a fractured skull and only one side of his body functioning, puts the plane on autopilot and struggles out of his seat to help.
Hey, wait a minute, I'm coming.
But the plane's gyros haven't stabilized sufficiently for the autopilot to take over.
Okay.
Now, no one's flying the plane.
705 Heavy, how do you hear?
Paul Candelino tries to establish radio contact with Flight 705, but there's no response. Their radar screens show the aircraft turn to the north, then the west, finally southwest, heading away from the airport. There's only an eerie silence. Anything could be happening on board the plane.
As I stepped into the forward cargo area, I was absolutely amazed at what I was seeing. All three of the individuals are completely covered with blood. Auburn Calloway on his back. There are papers everywhere in the back. You can see where the jump seats, which is just a normal commercial airline seat, has had the covers torn off. There's bloody footprints on the top of the ceiling. There are coats that have come out of closets. It's total carnage in the back.
Sanders has disarmed Calloway and handed the spear to Tucker.
You move up to it.
You keep him contained. I'm going to get the airplane.
Go get the airplane.
They decide that Sanders, the captain, should fly the plane back to Memphis.
You take this.
Tucker wants the weapons as far away from Calloway as possible and asks Sanders to take them with him to the cockpit.
In an emergency situation, it's expected that the captain of the airplane will fly the airplane. I was in somewhat of a daze because of the fight. I wasn't sure of the direction of the airplane. I wasn't sure of the condition of the airplane, but it appeared to be flying okay. I was bleeding excessively from the top of my head. I couldn't see out of my left eye. I thought the fight was over. I mean, I had hit Calloway 4 times in the head with a 20-ounce framing hammer as hard as I could swing it. He had stopped fighting, and he was bleeding, and he looked like he was severely injured.
Tucker can't tell anymore whether his hand is gripping the spear. The blows to his head have caused a blood clot on his brain and have damaged his sense of touch.
Let me up! Let me up! I won't fight anymore, please! I can't breathe!
Though several gashes have been opened in his skull, Auburn Calloway cannot be trusted. Both pilots know their strength is quickly running out.
I can't breathe!
Sanders, safely back in the driver's seat, must get the plane on the ground, and fast.
Memphis, can you hear me?
Is this Express 705 Heavy?
705 Heavy, yes.
Express 705 Heavy, Memphis.
Roger, I do hear you. You can proceed direct to Memphis if able. Expect runway 9er. The altimeter is 30.29er.
You understand we're declaring an emergency. We need security to meet the airplane. We'll stop on the runway if we can.
Captain Sanders, without his glasses and with blood dripping into his eyes, thinks that the plane is on a course back to the airport. But it's still heading southwest, away from Memphis at over 550 kilometers per hour.
Roger. Express 705 Heavy, is the situation under control?
Or is it still in progress?
We appear to have it under control.
Candelino wants to warn the pilot, but he's afraid the crew may still be under attack and trying to mislead the hijackers by flying in the wrong direction.
Express 705 Heavy, are you able to turn toward the airport?
Yeah, give me a vector.
100 Vector Memphis.
Sanders takes the plane off autopilot and sets a course back to the airport.
We're turning to the airport now.
For now, aboard the DC-10, the situation seems under control, but a potential disaster is only moments away. At the Memphis airport, emergency personnel begin to move into position.
We need security to meet the airplane. We'll stop on the runway if we can.
A FedEx cargo plane is about to land after a would-be hijacker tried to seize control. All members of the crew are badly injured. Paramedic David Teague is one of the first to get the call.
They came over the loudspeaker system from the Air Traffic Control Center, and I was new to the area, so I wasn't able to understand them real well. But I got the words hijacking and some other stuff, and was advised that there had been a hijacking on an airplane, and then dispatched us out to the runway where the plane was going to be landed.
The airplane is heading for the safety of Memphis Airport, but that in itself presents another scary possibility. The aircraft is more than 16,000 kilos over the recommended landing weight, with more than 38,000 kilos of fuel still in its tanks. In most emergency landing situations, there's time and opportunity to dump any excess fuel. But Sanders knows the switches and levers are too far away to access safely.
You'd have to get up and go back to the engineer's panel where the fuel dumping switches are and set up the engineer's fuel panel to dump fuel. So it's virtually impossible for, say, the captain to dump fuel while he's attempting to fly the airplane.
In the galley, Auburn Calloway still hasn't given up the fight. Calloway drags himself towards the jump seats with Peterson and Tucker on top of him. He hopes to gain enough leverage to get back on his feet, where he'll have an advantage.
He was using his thumbs to go ahead and try and push my eyes out, doing everything he possibly could to break Andy and I down as a team. You know, we could handle him together, but we certainly couldn't handle it one-on-one. This is certainly a fight against the clock. Auburn's getting stronger. I know we're getting weaker.
I knew if he ever got back in the cockpit, we were history. I just knew we had to keep him. Somehow, we had to keep him from getting back in that cockpit.
Approaching 7,000 feet, the fight in the back started again. And it was as violent and as loud as when I was in the back in the midst of the fight. It became so violent and loud that approaching 7,000 feet, I decided that I was going to level the airplane, turn on the autopilot, go to the back of the airplane, and kill Calloway. It was so severe, I thought that had to be done.
The DC-10 is less than 40 kilometers from Memphis Airport.
Is he under control? I don't know.
The sound of the struggle worries Sanders. He decides this has to end.
I released the seatbelt, climbed out of my seat, headed to the back of the airplane, and Jim Tucker said to me, "David, I think we have him under control now." I said, "Are you sure?"
Yeah, he is.
He said, "I think we have him under control." I went back to the seat, climbed into the left seat of the airplane, continued the descent on down toward the airport.
Express 705 Heavy.
Verify the situation is still under control?
Yeah, it's sort of under control.
Wind is 030.
5, cleared to land, runway 9er.
Clear to land?
Now Sanders faces yet another possible disaster. The delay caused by getting out of his seat means he's way over the normal approach speed, too high and too fast. He'll not be able to slow the overweight plane quickly enough to land on runway 9er.
I'm coming around to 36 left.
Runway 36 left is longer at 2,800 meters, but it's perpendicular to his flight path. To land there, he needs to make a series of turns, reasonable maneuvers for a fighter jet or a crop duster, but for an overloaded DC-10 with an injured pilot, nearly impossible. First, he must turn 90 degrees to the right, fly parallel to the runway, and then execute a tight 180-degree turn.
Okay, Express 705 Heavy, runway 36 left, cleared to land. Cleared visual approach 36 left. Wind is 050 at 8.
Sanders must ignore the computer warnings and push the plane beyond normal operating limits. The plane is nearly on its side.
All of a sudden, he just turned it up on its wingtips, looked like a fighter jet, and put it in a real tight turn, and then disappeared down behind the terminal. When he got down low enough, we couldn't see him. And at first, I thought he might have crashed because there was some construction going on the airport at that time, and there was some smoke coming up south of the terminal, kind of where we were going.
A hammer is lying in the galley. The men struggle to reach it. This could be Calloway's last chance to gain control. Sanders has turned 90 degrees to the south, flying the downwind leg parallel to runway 36 left.
The airplane was probably at about 300 feet above the ground at that time. The throttles are at idle. They've been at idle since I left 7,000 feet. That's an extremely unusual engine power setting to land a big airplane. You always land, make the approach with power on, a lot of power on. In this case, it was at idle because I wanted the airplane to slow down so that we would not exceed the limits of the landing gear and the flaps, so that we would touch down at or below 195 knots.
With flaps extended and landing gear down, Sanders is still coming in too fast, and he's being bombarded by computerized auto-warning alarms. The runway is 2,800 meters long. A normal DC-10 needs only 1,900 meters to stop, but Flight 705 is too heavy. Even this runway may not be long enough. Peterson manages for the first time in the fight to get hold of a hammer, but is extremely weak due to blood loss.
You gotta hit him, Andy, you gotta hit him!
I was almost like pleading with him, and I told him, I said, Andy, you know, you gotta hit him. You know, he's about ready to, to take us down.
And I guess I gave him kind of a blank stare of, what are you talking about? And he looked at me real stern, like a father would look at his son, saying, you've got to do this. And he said, hit him.
The DC-10 is only meters above the runway, traveling at 382 kilometers per hour. Sanders can only hope he won't explode the tires or crash beyond the runway. Luckily, all 10 tires withstand the landing impact. Captain David Sanders has landed the plane with only 300 meters of runway to spare. The crew of Flight 705 is safely on the ground, but not out of danger.
Blow the door!
The chute is covered with kind of a talcum powder, so it won't stick when it needs to be deployed, but it made it slick trying to go up.
The police and firemen tried to climb up the slide. One fireman made it almost all the way to the top, and I leaned out the door of the airplane and pulled him on board.
Who's the bad guy? That's the attacker.
There was blood all over the floor, all over the ceiling. The seats in the little area were just covered with blood.
You got any handcuffs? Huh? If not, you better get some, because that son of a bitch is still dangerous.
I need handcuffs. Can you throw me some handcuffs?
Teague is thrown a pair of handcuffs.
Stand here in the middle of the chain. Ouch!
Get your foot off! You're hurting me! Ow!
Sanders holds Calloway down as Teague examines Peterson, who barely has a pulse and is the first crew member to leave the plane. Sanders is the last member of the crew on board.
Standing in the door of the airplane, I had a sense of euphoria I've never experienced before or since. It was the sense of we had been there, and we came back and we won.
Due to the strength and courage of its crew, a FedEx DC-10 has safely landed back home. The three men have weathered the attack of a co-worker, but they're badly injured. Co-pilot Jim Tucker has bone chips driven into his brain. Flight engineer Andy Peterson's life is in danger from massive blood loss. Both are in critical condition. The wounded men are rushed to the regional medical center at Memphis. The pilot, Dave Sanders, shares an ambulance with Tucker. It's only during this ride that he realizes the extent and severity of his co-pilot's injuries. Tucker is taken to emergency by stretcher. Sanders is helped, but can walk. Restrained and under guard, Calloway is also taken to the same emergency facility. But the important question still remains: why did Auburn Calloway attack the crew of Flight 705? The full story is beginning to unfold. Divorced in 1990, Auburn Calloway still tries to support his ex-wife and their 2 children, and wants to secure their financial future.
He was very interested in the welfare of his children, very interested that they not live the kind of childhood he had lived.
The evidence for a suicidal mission against FedEx grows as investigators search the aircraft and find a letter to Calloway's estranged wife.
Dear Pat, I want you and the kids to know that I lived for you. I thought of your welfare every day. Though, for example, how can I guarantee having enough money for Keela and Bernie's Stanford education?
He was obsessed with his financial well-being. He was interested in his children. I tend to believe he's interested in his marriage. And I know his marriage was coming apart, or had come apart, basically, at the time of this incident. But I suspect he was also a difficult man to be married to.
By April the 7th, 1994, Calloway may be thinking his career is over. Life had been one disappointment after another. The failed marriage, the kids he can't afford to send to university, the brilliant pilot who ends up as an engineer on a cargo plane. And now even that may be about to go. The following day, he's supposed to report to a FedEx hearing about falsified information he'd given the company.
During our investigation, it appeared that he had overestimated the number of hours of flight experience that he had, and that the company was taking a look at this.
Calloway may be afraid he'll be fired. At just 42, his professional life could be finished. He comes up with a solution.
The goal is to leave my children well off. The goal is to escape, I guess, the pain of this life. I can't continue to participate in this life and still leave them well off because I'm fixing to lose my career. And I won't have the ability to provide for them like I'd like to. But my life has value if it's given in an accident.
Calloway cashes in all the funds he can lay his hands on and sends a total of $54,000 to his ex-wife. But his life insurance is worth about $2.5 million if he dies in a work-related accident.
I would much rather go on a date, time, place, and a method of my own choosing. I resolved some time ago that the next time my security and future is threatened or seriously jeopardized, it's time. My time to go.
Perhaps he believes his family would receive the maximum insurance payout if he crashed the plane in an apparent accident. If this was Calloway's idea, he was planning it perfectly. He was armed with unusual weapons for a hijacking, hammers and a spear gun. After injuring the crew, he could take control of the plane. A bomb or gun could leave traces at the scene of a crash, but if investigators found a spear gun or hammers, it would be very difficult to tie them to an attack on the crew.
I believe it would have been impossible to tell the difference in the type of injuries that a hammer would have made with the type of injuries that you might sustain in a large crash. Auburn had spent the week leading up to this incident preparing to die and basically get his affairs in order.
Calloway even goes to a lawyer to change his will before boarding the FedEx flight.
He left his will and testament on his bed so that it would be easily found.
For any crash to look like an accident, there is a key obstacle: the plane's cockpit voice recorder. Switching off the CVR's power would disable any recording.
I think she'll fly.
As long as all the nuts and bolts are there.
Yeah.
If Peterson, in his pre-flight inspection, discovers the thrown switch, it would be a setback. But Calloway would know he simply has to fly the airplane for half an hour. That's the length of the tape's recording time. After 30 minutes, any incriminating recording would be gone forever.
I think he was going to do something very, very horrible with it. Something along the lines of what we've seen on 9/11.
Had Calloway been able to seize control of the plane, he could have crashed the DC-10 with over 38,000 kilos of fuel aboard into any site, including the FedEx headquarters, the hub, crippling his employer and killing a large number of workers on the ground. It would have been the ultimate revenge for perceived injustices by the company.
The company may never have figured out exactly why that airplane crashed back into the hub.
Well, after 9/11, there were a lot of improvements to our security program, both in the United States and worldwide. Our cockpit crew members are the most highly checked and monitored group of people in the world. I only know of this one incident in my 46 years of aviation experience where a crew member was involved in something like this.
The flight of FedEx 705 took about 30 minutes, but the impact it had will last for years.
He was convicted of attempt aircraft piracy, an offense that carried a minimum of 20 years confinement and up to life in prison.
Although Auburn Calloway pleaded temporary insanity at his trial, the jury didn't believe him and found him guilty. On August the 11th, 1995, he was sentenced to life imprisonment in a federal penitentiary. He has no chance of parole.
The pilots on Flight 705, they are the real heroes. It is amazing that they were able to do what they did, given the injuries that were inflicted upon them.
When someone's struck with a hammer on the skull, there can be linear radiating cracks that go out on the skull. And then if it's hard enough, there may well be in-driven bone right at the site where the hammer head hits the skull and drives it into the skull.
This is a replica of my skull cap. It was put together by use of a CAT scan protocol to give the proper shape of my skull and also the shape of the defect that we're dealing with here. This is the area that I was hit on the left parietal. For a year and a half, I was actually walking around in this configuration. It took 2.5 years to recover completely because I had to learn how to walk, talk, and chew gum all over again. I had 3 major operations.
I operated on him twice more after his initial injury and then followed him through his rehabilitation.
They can fashion a piece of material to fit the exact size of the defect, the shape of the skull, and of course the thickness of the skull as well. It's a blown acrylic called an HTR, or hard tissue replacement.
He had difficulty with speech, difficulty with sensation and motor strength on the right side, and he came back to where he can now probably, if he wanted to, break my fingers with a handshake.
On May the 26th, 1994, the crew of FedEx Flight 705 was awarded the Airline Pilots Association Gold Medal Award for heroism, the highest award a civilian pilot can receive. However, because of the legacy of their injuries, none of the crew has been certified as medically fit to fly commercially.
I always thought, I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna overcome this thing. Except that that's when they found out that I had a slight seizure disorder. I'm seizure-free, but it's because I had to take medication. And the only way for me to be able to fly without somebody with me is to be off of medication. At this particular point, it's been ascertained that I'll never be able to do that. I'll be on medication for the rest of my life.
I miss the flying. Every time I see an airplane go over, I wonder where it's going. So I miss that part of it. But I really cherish the fact that, I'm still alive and able to be with my family.
The bond of pilots and what you do together in the airplane, outside the airplane, all that, I miss that. I miss it very much.
July 1988. A US Navy cruiser is battling Iranian gunboats in the Persian Gulf. Suddenly, its radar picks up a mystery aircraft. Is this plane friend or foe? They have 7 minutes to decide. As the aircraft draws ever closer, the pressure mounts.
If you do not change course to 270 immediately.
And the captain is faced with a terrible choice. Shoot it down or risk the lives of his own crew.
United States Defense Measures.
3,000.
We're not getting any oxygen. We have this terrain alarm. Eva Tower, Aero Crew 603.
We are in an emergency.
It's a routine short-haul flight, but an Iranian passenger jet is heading into mortal danger.
It's opening fire with guns.
It's approaching a war zone in which a US Navy ship is engaged in combat. The crew are on a state of high alert. Anything that draws near is seen as a threat.
Air contact still inbound, increasing speed and descending range 11
United
miles.
States naval warship.
Closing and descending 1,000.
Now you're in real serious business.
You are standing into danger.
Wait a minute. I could be dead.
Range 13 miles.
The aircraft is not responding to warnings. Iran Air 655 seems oblivious to the danger. In 1988, Iran and Iraq have reached a stalemate in a savage 8-year conflict. It's a war of attrition, and both sides' oil exports are a target. The United States has become the chief watchdog of the Persian Gulf. Over 30 US warships protect neutral tankers. Dawn, July the 3rd. After a month on routine patrol, the USS Vincennes is heading towards port in Bahrain. Her crew are due a few days' rest and recuperation. But while his men are looking forward to the July the 4th break, Captain Will Rogers is already up. He's received disturbing reports from US intelligence, warning him to expect trouble from Iranian forces over this holiday weekend.
Yeah.
In the Vincennes Combat Information Center, the watch officer has received an urgent message from another ship in the US fleet that Iranian gunboats are harassing a Pakistani merchant vessel.
Skipper, you better come down. Sounds like the Montgomery's got her nose in a beehive.
I'll be right there.
The frigate USS Elmer Montgomery is north of the Vincennes near the narrow Strait of Hormuz. It's here that Iranian gunboats have been most active in attacking oil tankers as they exit the Persian Gulf. Designed to protect an aircraft carrier group, the Vincennes is a billion-dollar Aegis cruiser. It's armed with Mark 26 missile launchers, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, 2 5-inch guns, and the Phalanx close-in weapons system, which fires over 3,000 rounds a minute. But what makes the ship so special is its high-tech radar. The phased array Spy-1 can simultaneously search and track over 100 targets over 300 kilometers away. To crew members like Mike Zunino and Mark Nielsen, the Vincennes is simply Star Wars at sea.
I was very proud. Just technically, it just felt like a strong, secure ship to be on. We felt invincible in a way.
We had some of the most up-to-date weaponry and the radar and everything else. There wasn't a whole lot that we couldn't do.
Inside the Combat Information Center, Captain Rogers oversees a state-of-the-art computerized command and control system. His large-screen displays give him an instant picture of the tactical situation. Lieutenant Commander Vic Guillory is the tactical action officer responsible for surface warfare.
Vic, what do we got on visual?
Got a cluster of bog hammers here near the Montgomery. Another cluster may be closing a merchant vessel.
Over a dozen Iranian bog hammer gunboats appear to be preparing to attack a merchant ship. Bog hammers are the generic name for fast speedboats manned by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, a fundamentalist paramilitary force.
We knew that they had rockets. We knew that they had machine guns. We knew that if they got within certain range that they could, you know, literally fire off their rockets and cause grave danger.
In 1988, Iranian forces have been attacking up to 13 foreign tankers per month. Their aim is to prevent Saddam Hussein from exporting Iraqi oil. Captain Rogers sends his helicopter, call sign Ocean Lord, to investigate just what the gunboats are up to.
Roger that. Vincennes out. Vector in, Ocean Lord.
Ocean Lord is a Sikorsky Seahawk, a twin-engine helicopter designed for reconnaissance, anti-submarine and anti-ship warfare.
Roger, Trinity Sword, we read you.
Vectoring toward Montgomery now.
Ocean Lord's pilot soon finds the gunboats. They're not acting suspiciously. But he flies too close to the Iranian craft. The response is immediate, a burst of anti-aircraft fire.
Jesus! Trinity Lord, this is Ocean Lord 2-5. We are taking fire. Executing evasion. Clearing.
2-5, this is Trinity Sword Actual. Is anyone hurt? Confirm hostile fire, over.
Trinity Sword, no injuries. We confirm 8 to 10 rounds of airburst from the northernmost group of Iranian small craft. Over.
Ocean Lord, this is Trinity Sword Actual. Return immediately to Vincennes cover. Close Ocean Lord's position at best speed, bearing 330.
Under the U.S. rules of engagement, Captain Rogers is allowed to respond with force in self-defense.
30, full speed.
Set general quarters.
Officer of the deck, set general quarters.
The situation is escalating rapidly.
General quarters, all hands man your battle stations.
When we went to general quarters, all of the hatches had to be tightened down. Everything had to be at a certain level of defense in case something happened.
Once you get to that station, you're supposed to don your helmet and your gas mask. Nobody's allowed to move around the ship. You're to stay at your battle stations doing your job.
Only 6.5 minutes after Rogers calls general quarters, the Vincennes is ready for combat. The crew have practiced the drill many times, but today it's for real. By chance, a Navy media crew is on the bridge filming as the ship surges north at over 30 knots. Captain Rogers is now heading for a lethal confrontation with the Iranian gunboats. It will be the Vincennes' first time in action. The outcome will be catastrophic. July the 3rd, 1988. The USS Vincennes powers north towards the Strait of Hormuz. Another US ship has reported aggressive activity by Iranian gunboats. Those boats have already fired on the Vincennes helicopter.
Jesus!
Captain Will Rogers III has been in the Gulf for just over a month, but he's already established a reputation as a commander who is prepared to take robust action. His ship is nicknamed the Robo-Cruiser.
The deck, set general quarters.
Meanwhile, some 87 kilometers away at Iran's Bandar Abbas airport, Iran Air Flight 655 is waiting to push back for a routine 28-minute hop across the Strait of Hormuz to Dubai. 37-year-old Mohsen Rasayan is the captain. His brother Hussein knows he's dedicated to the job.
655 standing by for ATC clearance.
He was very enjoying what he was doing. He really liked it. He was logging so many hours, over 10,000 hours of flight.
Request update on status of IR.
Captain Rasayan's flight is delayed. It's 27 minutes behind schedule due to a passenger with immigration problems. The holdup will soon confuse the crew of Vincennes, despite all their sophisticated technology. On the bridge, a Navy media crew continues to film as the Vincennes closes within striking distance of the Iranian Boghammer gunboats.
About 3 degrees north, steady course 015 I. We're about 3 degrees, go course 015. Got a visual on the Boghammer. See it?
Even though his helicopter has already been shot at, Captain Rogers only has the authority to open fire if he believes his ship is under direct threat. In the Gulf haze, it's hard to see just what the gunboats are doing.
One appears to be going out to starboard and one's in the middle. Just on starboard bow has a machine gun on it, according to 6.
But Captain Rogers doesn't have to wait for the gunboats to open fire. If they behave aggressively, that's reason enough for him to take the first shot.
Coming inbound fast. 1 at 350 is inbound.
As they turn and begin to maneuver and close us fairly high speed and on erratic courses, we asked permission to fire a warning shot.
This is Vincennes. Request permission to engage Boghammer Group.
The service commander for the Gulf is on board his ship in Bahrain. Captain Richard McKenna has no hesitation in granting permission.
The fact that the helicopter was shot at virtually required a response.
Vincent, this is Garcia. Take Boghammer Group with guns.
The rules of engagement at that juncture were quite clear, and so there was no question as to what was required at that juncture.
I say again, take Boghammer Group with guns, over.
Gulf Sierra, this is Vincennes. Opening fire with guns. Assumed hostile track 4456. Vincennes out. You can fire for effect.
Making track with guns.
It's 9:43 a.m. A routine encounter in the Persian Gulf has become deadly serious.
The ship shakes. It's a 5-inch gun. I mean, there's a lot of powder behind it to propel that projectile.
Oh man, he's right behind him. 300.
This is the first time that the crew of the Vincennes have ever seen action.
It's a 028 now.
Combat was, that was the furthest thing probably from any of us. Even though we were a combat ship, it was one of those things. It's like it'll never happen to us, but yet it did.
The gunboats are now shooting back, but their fire is falling well short. The Vincennes and the Montgomery take them on together. The battle is fast-moving with frequent changes of course.
We were maneuvering rapidly because, in the first place, my desire was to keep them at arm's length, if you will. We were shifting targets as rapidly as we could, and Montgomery at the same time was directed to engage a small craft, which he did.
Verify me rounds to the tray.
The Vincennes and the Montgomery are now locked in a full-scale sea battle. Anything that approaches the U.S. ships will be assessed as a possible threat.
Battery released 10 rounds. Weapons.
Lieutenant Commander Scott Lustig is the officer responsible for alerting the captain to potential airborne threats. He's been tracking an aircraft that has suddenly changed course and is now heading towards the Vincennes.
4472, Iranian P-3, range 62 miles.
The plane has been identified as an Iranian P-3 Orion, a long-range maritime surveillance aircraft. In a well-rehearsed procedure, the Vincennes warns the P-3 on a military frequency that he's being tracked.
270, this is United States Naval warship. Request you state your intentions.
U.S. warship, this is Iranian Papa 3. Our intention is search mission. We keep clear of your unit.
The pilot promises to keep his distance, but Captain Rogers knows the P-3 is still watching him on radar. He's concerned that it could call in an Iranian airstrike. This battle is becoming more dangerous by the minute.
Yeah, I want rounds in the tray. Give me a firing solution for that northernmost group of Boghammers. Scott, keep me updated on the P-3.
Meanwhile, with all his passengers finally on board, Captain Rizayan is ready to depart.
Confirm, taxi V5 is open.
Iran Air 655.
On the 3rd of July, there are 10 civilian flights scheduled from Bandar Abbas. But the Iranian Air Force also uses this airport. US intelligence has warned that the recent transfer of F-14 fighters here represents an increased threat.
Have a nice flight.
655 cleared for takeoff.
Captain Razayan has no way of knowing that Iran Air 655 is heading directly towards a raging sea battle. Within seconds of liftoff, the Vincennes detects Flight 655. Sophisticated as the radar is, it cannot determine the size or type of aircraft. Identification Supervisor Anderson begins a routine to establish whether the aircraft is a friend or foe. His first step is to use a system called IFF.
All large aircraft have IFF. They all have identification friend or foe. Every aircraft has its own code, and you're able to look up that code and say, okay, it does give you more information.
Anderson sets out to identify the IFF signal of this incoming track. At the press of a button, an electronic pulse radiates into the atmosphere. And aircraft transponders automatically bounce back an electronic reply, squawking the signature modes and codes that reveal whether the aircraft is a friend or foe. Modes 1, 2, and 4 indicate military aircraft. Iran Air 655 has squawked Mode 3.
Everybody has Mode 3. So that alone doesn't identify a non-hostile aircraft. It could be civilian, it could be military.
As a military aircraft could conceal its identity by squawking Mode 3, Anderson's next step is to consult a commercial air schedule. He looks to see if there's a passenger flight due to depart from Bandar Abbas at this time. But he finds nothing.
Unidentified Iranian aircraft on course 203, speed 303 knots, altitude 4,000 feet. This is United States.
So the Vincennes now tries to contact the plane directly on a military distress frequency.
40 miles from you. You are approaching United States naval warship in international waters. Request you state your intentions. Over.
But there's no response. For all its state-of-the-art technology, the Vincennes doesn't have a radio tuned to civil air traffic control frequencies.
Unidentified aircraft on course 206, speed.
So the only option left is for the ship to call the mystery aircraft on the civilian international air distress frequency.
You are approaching a United States naval warship. Request you remain clear.
But there's still no answer from Flight 655. With the incoming plane closing in on the Vincennes at 8 kilometers every minute, Anderson is now alarmed to discover its IFF signal appears to have changed. The plane is squawking both Mode 3 and Mode 2, 1100. When Anderson consults his code list, he makes a disturbing discovery. The 1100 suggests that this plane could be an Iranian F-14 fighter.
All stations IDS, I have a possible Mode 2 on track 4131, 1100, which breaks as an F-14.
Possible Mode 2, breaking as an F-14. I repeat, incoming Mode 2.
Anderson's words spread like wildfire throughout the CIC. The aircraft is now labeled as an F-14 fighter on the tactical displays in front of Captain Rogers. 48 kilometers away, the Airbus with its 290 passengers climbs out over the Persian Gulf. They have no idea that they've been misidentified and are flying into danger. An Iranian passenger jet heading for Dubai is unknowingly flying directly towards a US warship engaged in battle in the Strait of Hormuz. On board the USS Vincennes, Identification Supervisor Anderson thinks the airliner is an Iranian fighter jet.
Which breaks as an F-14.
Possible Mode 2.
In the Combat Information Center, Flight 655 is now labeled as a hostile F-14. In the 1970s, the US sold 80 F-14s to their then ally, the Shah of Iran. They are the most up-to-date fighter in the Iranian Air Force. The Vincennes crew think they're under attack.
My heartbeat was way up, my blood pressure was way up. It was like, wow. I mean, the adrenaline was just flowing.
Lieutenant Commander Scott Lustig is Captain William Rogers' anti-air warfare coordinator. With the incoming plane only 45 kilometers away, he seeks permission from headquarters to shoot it down if it comes too close.
My position, my intention is to engage at 20 nautical miles if he does not turn away. Do you concur? Over.
You should warn aircraft first, then take it under fire.
You start crossing 20 miles, and it's an absolute threat to the ship. You're out there in the middle of the ocean. It's serious business.
The pressure on Captain Rogers is mounting. But at this critical moment, just when he should be focusing on this new threat, his attention is drawn back to the battle with the gunboats.
We've got a foul bore down here.
Captain, we have a situation with Mount 51.
In the midst of combat, the Vincennes forward 5-inch gun has jammed.
All right, full rudder turn.
Bridge, CIC.
Hard to port. Steady ship's course. 280 degrees, maintain speed. Stand 25 knots.
Rogers is forced to turn his ship at high speed, swinging the cruiser's rear gun around to face the incoming fire.
Right, standard.
The ship leans, so if anything was not tied down, it of course went everywhere. It went sliding off, up against the wall. It turned sharp enough that if you were standing, you had to hold on to something to keep from falling over.
Bring aft gun to bear now.
As Captain Rogers struggles to keep the gunboats engaged, Captain Rezaian is busy with the routines of climbing to cruising altitude.
FIR 58, Dubai 0715.
Confirm you are squawking 6760.
Affirmative.
Confirmation that his aircraft is transmitting the correct civilian IFF code, so that it can be easily identified on radar. In the Vincennes Combat Information Center, Lieutenant William Mountford sees that the approaching plane is now squawking a Mode 3 IFF response. He thinks it may not be a military aircraft after all.
Sir, possible calm air.
Captain Rogers acknowledges the warning, but he's still concerned by the plane's failure to respond.
The aircraft was warned a number of times, continued to close. Time is a demon here. If I have a long time to sort things out, you're going to take more time to look at this and more time to look at that.
Unidentified aircraft on
As Flight 655 crosses the critical 37-kilometer threshold, the Vincennes warns it once again to alter course or risk the consequences.
01, 20 miles from you. You are standing into danger and may be subject to United States defensive measures. Request you remain clear of me.
Captain Rogers now has the authority to shoot the plane down.
Captain, do you wish to engage at 20 miles? Captain, do you wish to engage the target at 20 miles?
I had difficulty at 20 miles. I just did not want to shoot. I could not believe that this was really happening to us.
Captain, do you wish to engage the target at 20 miles?
Negative.
Captain Rogers has delayed firing, hoping that the plane will finally respond to the Vincennes' warnings. But what happens next destroys that faint hope. Petty Officer Leach is the Vincennes' tactical information coordinator. He's responsible for ensuring that all air contacts are properly tracked. What he reports now seems to remove any doubts. This is a hostile aircraft.
Altitude declining.
They see the plane diving towards them, a classic attack profile.
Now you're in real serious business because anything can happen at that point. Whether that aircraft might launch something at you, it could be the aircraft itself. 15 miles, that's pretty close and pretty serious.
Iranian aircraft on course 211, speed 385
Track 4131 approaching 13 nautical miles.
United States naval warship operating in international waters.
Wait a minute. I could be dead. the tension is just continually rising during this whole time. Everybody was on edge. Everybody was like, oh my God, what's going to happen next?
Subject to United States defense measures.
Inbound air contact, closing and descending 1,000 feet per mile. Range 13 miles.
Oh my God, it's getting closer. It's getting closer. What's the captain going to do? What's going to happen? You know, what are they going to do?
Iran Air 655 now signs off with Bandar Abbas Air Traffic Control.
8.4. Have a nice flight.
Thank you. Good day.
God damn it, he's getting close.
Mark, incoming bog hammer, bearing 042.
Air contact still inbound, increasing speed and descending, range 11 miles.
Captain Rogers' worst fear is that the Vincennes might face the same fate as another ship, the USS Stark. A year earlier, an Iraqi fighter launched 2 Exocet missiles at it. 37 sailors were killed, and the ship nearly lost. An inquiry blamed the incident on failures in command. The Stark had not defended itself. Its captain was reprimanded and allowed to resign from the Navy.
Captain, air contact still inbound, increasing speed and descending, range 11 miles.
Captain Rogers isn't about to make the same mistake.
Time is a demon here. At some point in time, you have to make the decision. When the aircraft reached a little over 10 miles, at that point in time, I either make the decision then or I don't make it at all, because I reached minimum weapons range.
It's the moment of truth. Captain Rogers turns his fire authorization key.
Take order, track 4131.
Do I have a take order on the contact?
Yes, take.
Birds away. Rails clear.
Iranian aircraft on course 209, speed 353 knots.
As the final warning goes out on the military air distress frequency, Rogers keeps his finger on the hold fire button so he can destroy the missiles if the aircraft finally responds.
Estimate 10 seconds to intercept.
Up on the bridge, the crew has confirmed the kill. The plane they believed was attacking them has been destroyed. Captain Rogers thinks he has saved his ship from destruction. Nothing could be further from the truth. Far from saving his crew, Rogers has just made a decision that will shock the world.
God damn it, he's getting close.
At the height of a naval battle with Iranian gunboats in the Persian Gulf, the USS Vincennes has detected an incoming aircraft.
Take order, track 4131.
In the ship's combat information center, that plane has been misidentified as an Iranian F-14 fighter. After the plane has failed to respond to warnings, Captain William Rogers has shot it down. But Rogers has made a fatal mistake. He's destroyed an Iranian passenger jet flying in an international air corridor. 290 passengers and crew are dead. Iranian television broadcasts distressing footage of their bodies floating in the Gulf. For Captain Rogers, the burden is heavy. Whatever mistakes have been made, he bears the ultimate responsibility. But for the victims' families, it's worse. Captain Rizayan's elder brother, Hussein, tries to identify his remains in a temporary mortuary in Bandar Abbas.
I try not to imagine where I went to. I try to forget it, and when I look at those bodies, I just can't control myself, and I just try to think about something else, not to think of what I saw.
Captain Rizayan's body is never recovered.
Really, I'm shattered. Our family, especially his kids, his wife, my parents, which they're still living, and there is not a day that they don't talk about this, of what happened, why it should have happened.
There's an immediate international outcry. The world wants to know how a cruiser with a state-of-the-art combat system could have mistaken a passenger airliner for an attacking Iranian fighter.
Captain, do you swear that the evidence you are giving in this matter, now an investigation...
The US government appoints Rear Admiral William Fogarty to conduct an inquiry to find out what went wrong.
My first reaction was, it was a tragedy. The thing that stuck the most to me was, you've got a lot of responsibilities ahead of you, Fogarty, and probably some sleepless nights.
And nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
The inquiry is conducted in accord with the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The stakes are high. Investigative journalist Roger Charles is a former Marine officer who's examined the story.
You're looking at a guy who's on top of the world. He's the captain of the billion-dollar Aegis cruiser, and now he's sitting at a table facing possible court-martial and even prison time.
Admiral Fogarty's team now scrutinizes the actions of the Vincennes crew in forensic detail. When Flight 655 first appears on radar, the USS Vincennes is in the midst of a battle with Iranian gunboats. All aircraft within a radius of 100 kilometers are monitored to ensure they do not pose a threat. So Identification Supervisor Anderson starts by checking his commercial air schedule to determine if this is a passenger flight. But he's confused. The schedule lists departures in local time, but Anderson is unsure whether that means the time in Bandar Abbas or Bahrain time, which is used on the ship.
You have the almost 30-minute delay caused by the late departure of IRR 655 due to a passenger with a visa problem. Then you have the 30-minute different time zone. So he looks at it and he's seeing there's nobody within an hour scheduled to be over us.
The IFF system is supposed to distinguish friend from foe. Admiral Fogarty knows it's critical to establish how the Vincennes could have confused a commercial airliner squawking Mode 3 with a fighter emitting Mode 2.
And in your mind, that was not Com Air.
In my mind, sir, it was not a Com Air.
And why?
Because I had saw that Mode 2 squawk, sir.
The Mode 2 was the big indicator for you?
Yes, sir.
From intelligence, Fogarty discovers that as Flight 655 prepares for takeoff, an Iranian F-14 is also on the tarmac at Bandar Abbas. It now appears that although Anderson rolls his ball tab to hook Flight 655 as it takes off, he leaves it hooked for almost 90 seconds. So although the hook symbol moves towards the Vincennes, the system is still reading IFF signals from the airport at Bandar Abbas. It's a human error caused by poor design on this high-tech warship.
He left the ball tab on Bandar Abbas. So what we believe happened, and I'm pretty sure this is exactly what happened, he picked up the Mode 2 of the Iranian fighter that was getting ready for takeoff behind the Airbus.
The identification of an F-14 appears to confirm intelligence, warning Captain Rogers to anticipate trouble over the July the 4th weekend. He now believes the aircraft is part of a coordinated strike on the Vincennes from both sea and air.
Sir, possible calm air.
So he places less weight on the warning that the incoming plane is possibly a commercial airliner.
Do you recall Lieutenant Montfort saying, calm air, calm air?
I absolutely remember him telling me that, and I think I raised my hand or something to that effect to indicate that I'd heard him.
You held up your decision to fire.
Yes, sir.
Why?
I wanted every bit of information I could get. IFF was an indicator, but I didn't care whether 1100 was an F-14 or that Falker that flies around out there. But at this point, I thought they always talk to us.
Iranian aircraft on course 211.
The Vincennes transmits a total of 10 radio warnings. Why does Flight 655 never respond?
What we do know for sure is the aircraft did not respond to the warnings. He had to have something, he being the commanding officer, as proof that this was commercial air. He never got that.
Unidentified Iranian aircraft on course 20.
But the Vincennes transmits 7 warnings on a military frequency that Flight 655 cannot receive.
The Airbus did not even have a radio that was set or could accept the military air distress frequency. I mean, it's just not something they had. They had no need for it. They were a commercial airplane.
The Vincennes broadcasts only 3 warnings on the civil distress frequency. But they don't clearly identify exactly who the ship is trying to contact.
Unidentified aircraft on course 210, speed 350, altitude.
The Vincennes radio talkers are citing the aircraft's ground speed.
Bearing 201, 20 miles from you. You are standing into danger and may be subject to United States defensive measures.
But Captain Razayan's instruments show airspeed, a relative measurement. Flight 655's indicated airspeed could have been 50 knots slower than the 350-knot ground speed cited by the Vincennes.
So if the pilot hears that, well, who are they talking to? They haven't identified us. They must be talking to maybe the P-3 or maybe some other Iranian aircraft.
Throughout its flight, Iran Air 655 transmits its squawk code, the unique label that tells radars what flight it is. If the Vincennes had called out that squawk code, Captain Razayan could have known immediately they were talking to him. But the US Navy does not require its radio operators to use this code when talking to civilian aircraft. As Flight 655 nears his ship,
Captain, do you wish to engage at 20 miles?
The pressure on Captain Rogers becomes intense.
Captain, do you wish to engage the target at 20 miles?
When you look at the time window that he had, he waited till the very last minute. And it becomes a point of, am I going to shoot or am I not going to shoot and wait, in which case he would not be following his responsibilities to protect his ship and his crew.
The decisive factor in Captain Rogers' decision to fire are the reports he receives that the plane is descending towards him, apparently about to attack.
Altitude declining.
It's the crucial moment. The inquiry team presses Tactical Information Coordinator Leach on his call.
Okay, were you reporting descending elevations over the net?
Over the internal net? Yes, sir.
So in other words, when you saw that track, that aircraft start descending, you were reporting that up to TAO, CO, Gulf Whiskey?
Yes, sir.
Like an aircraft's black box, the Vincennes computers have recorded all the data on the Combat Information Center's screens. Those records show that Iran Air 655 had never descended.
It was, in fact, ascending the whole time. That was a revelation that we had not anticipated.
Altitude declining.
Is it possible that somebody, although the data showed perhaps that it was going up, would say it's going down, descending?
Fogarty sends a medical team, including a psychiatrist, to the Vincennes. They report that a condition called scenario fulfillment could have played a part in the tragedy.
Range 13 miles.
And as it turns out, where you believe something so badly is going to happen, that whether the data shows you it's not the case, you believe it's happening.
Had those in command on that day checked their monitors, they would have seen that Flight 655 was not diving in a classic attack profile, but was continuing its steady climb. Yet no one thought to do so.
Well, Scott, we had this disparity between what the data indicates happened and what the people said they saw at their various altitudes. Any idea why?
Well, sir, the disparity baffles me. I thought about this for many days now, and I came to the realization that this data to me doesn't mean anything because I reacted to people I had operated with who were reliable. And when they reported at short range, they had decreasing altitude, increasing speed. I had no reason to doubt them. I had to make a split-second recommendation to the commanding officer, and I did.
So Lieutenant Commander Lustig trusts his men's judgment, and Captain Rogers trusts Lieutenant Commander Lustig's.
My confidence in Lieutenant Commander Lustig confirmed to me that the aircraft was, in fact, a threat. At 9 miles, I felt I could no longer delay defensive action. I granted firing permission.
When I looked at the timeline that he had to make a decision and the information he was given upon which to make that decision, it was my feeling, to this day I still feel the same way, that he made the right decision with the main thing in his mind: I don't want my ship to get hit.
Take order, track 4131.
The Vincennes' sophisticated combat information system gives its crew accurate information, but their fear has created a threat where none exists. After a month, Admiral Fogarty's investigation is over. He finds that the downing of Iran Air 655 was not the result of any negligent or culpable conduct by any US naval personnel. Captain Rogers acted in a prudent manner, given the information available to him and the short time frame in which he had to make his critical decision. Fogarty says Iran must share the responsibility for hazarding one of their civilian airliners in close proximity to hostilities. The US government publishes an edited version of Admiral Fogarty's inquiry, but it has concealed one key fact from the world. That fact will cast a whole new light on the tragedy of Iran Air Flight 655. In August 1988, a detailed inquiry by Admiral William Fogarty into the shooting down of Iran Air 655 concludes that the captain and crew of the USS Vincennes acted properly in the face of what they believed was a threat to their ship. But investigative journalist Roger Charles is not convinced. He reads a copy of the Fogarty inquiry and wonders why it contains no map showing the Vincennes' position.
I knew the fact that there was no such chart in the Fogarty report, again, was a signal, and a curious signal to me. Why is it not there?
Skipper, you better come down. Sounds like the Montgomery's got her nose in a beehive.
I'll be right there.
When Captain Rogers first hears that Iranian gunboats are harassing merchant shipping, the Vincennes is well south of the Montgomery and destined for port in Bahrain.
Gulf Sierra, this is Vincennes. Request permission to support USS Montgomery against surface contacts. Over.
Rogers asks Captain Richard McKenna, his surface commander, for permission to turn north to support the Montgomery. but McKenna only authorizes him to send his helicopter to investigate.
Roger that. Vincennes out. Vector in, Ocean Lord.
But Captain McKenna is later startled to discover that the Vincennes has turned around and has closed on the Montgomery's position. He orders him to leave the helicopter in place and turn back immediately.
My own personal opinion is it really did feel that they were looking for action when they went to see the Elmer Montgomery. My own feeling is that the situation was not out of control. It was really my call, and yet, even though they were assigned another station, they took it upon themselves to be there. And to that extent, I feel that, you know, I mean, that's where the general feeling, and not just my own, comes that maybe they were looking for trouble.
Jesus! Trinity Lord, this is Ocean Lord 2-5. We are taking...
But once the Iranian gunboats fired upon the Vincennes helicopter, the situation changed.
Close Ocean Lord's position at best speed.
The rules of engagement now allow Captain Rogers to respond with force.
General quarters.
Officer of the...
He's now authorized to head off in hot pursuit of the gunboats. But where does that lead him? In 1990, Roger Charles obtains a copy of a restricted report on the destruction of Iran Air 655 by the International Civil Aviation Organization. It gives the Vincennes coordinates. When Charles plots them on a chart, he makes a startling discovery. At the time of the shootdown, the Vincennes is over 4 kilometers inside Iranian territorial waters. By chasing the gunboats back into Iranian territory, Rogers inadvertently places his ship directly in the flight path of Iran Air 655.
If Rogers had not taken the Vincennes up to attack the gunboats, there would have been no shoot down of IR 655. I mean, that's clear. There would have been no ongoing surface action. Rogers would have had his radar screen set for the air side of things. The focus would have only been on the air picture. They would have had plenty of time to make a proper determination that this was a commercial airliner.
Despite the tragedy, the crew of the Vincennes receive a hero's welcome on their return to port in San Diego.
Any ship in the Navy is a multi-mission ship.
Captain, do you wish to engage the target at 20 miles?
Lieutenant Commander Scott Lustig is awarded a Navy Commendation Medal for his ability to maintain his poise and confidence under fire.
Take order, track 4131.
Captain Rogers receives the Legion of Merit for his performance as commanding officer of the Vincennes. Both men have since retired from the Navy. Every year, the families of those who died on Iran Air 655 commemorate their loss in the Persian Gulf. For Hussein Rezaian, the brother of Flight 655's captain, time has not healed the wounds.
I still feel the same way. Although I try to keep myself busy, not to think about it, because it's still, I mean, it's an unforgettable human tragedy. Even after 17 years passed, the horrors of what went on in that day, you know, still lingers on in everybody's life.
In a world where technology grows ever more sophisticated, fear, the most basic of human instincts, can create the greatest tragedies. A deadly explosion rocks an airliner flying at 10,000 meters.
A bomb has exploded on board. Bravo, Oscar, Mike, Bravo.
The blast kills a passenger and cripples the plane. The crew struggles to save 293 lives. The bombing sets in motion an international manhunt. While the terrorist prepares to strike again.
3,000. We're not getting any oxygen. We have the terrain alarm. Eva Tower, Aero Peru 603. We are in an emergency.
On December the 11th, 1994, Philippine Airlines Flight 434 is 2 hours into the second leg of a routine flight from Manila to Tokyo. An unsuspecting passenger is sitting on a ticking bomb. The explosion on board cripples the flight control system. Unless the pilot can regain control, the jumbo jet may crash into the Pacific Ocean.
This is Philippine Airlines 434. A bomb has exploded on board. Bravo, Oscar, Mike, Bravo.
The bombing is a frightening new development by a terrorist on the cutting edge of science.
The way that the timing device was hidden inside the Casio watch just made the whole thing very concealable and very worrisome.
But this is more than the hunt for a terrorist bomber. This is a story of how investigators make a shocking discovery. The explosion on PAL 434 is only a test for an attack on American carriers, an attack that would dwarf every other terrorist atrocity at the time. It's before sunrise on December the 11th, 1994. While most inhabitants of this city of 1.5 million have a few more hours to sleep, 26-year-old Amaldo Forlani makes an early start. Forlani is not his real name. It's the alias he's chosen for today's mission. He's actually from Pakistan, not Italy. He is putting his latest invention through an important test. Everything must go like clockwork. In his line of work, there's no room for error. He is a highly skilled terrorist bomb builder. He packs the liquid explosive bomb very carefully. From his apartment downtown, it takes less than 30 minutes to get to the airport. He arrives in plenty of time for his 5 a.m. flight with Philippine Airlines. Before he can board, the bomber must outwit airport security screening procedures. He's designed the components of his bomb to pass undetected by X-ray and metal detection equipment. Or so he hopes. He bought the ticket as Amaldo Forlani. He's a skilled forger, and he has made himself a fake Italian passport with that identity. If his cover is blown, his career as a globe-trotting terrorist is over. Having successfully got the bomb through airport security, he boards his Philippine Airlines flight. The final destination of PAL 434 is Tokyo, but there's a stopover in the Philippine resort town of Cebu, over 550 kilometers to the south of Manila. This is as far as the bomber is flying today.
10,000 feet, and weather's still looking clear.
Thanks, Dex. I'm engaging autopilot. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Ed Reyes speaking. Welcome aboard Flight 434, flying south from Manila to Cebu and continuing onward to Narita Airport, Tokyo.
Flight 434 is under the command of Captain Ed Reyes, a former Air Force pilot who's been flying for Philippine Airlines for 9 years.
And our estimated arrival time is now 5:45. The weather in Cebu is...
The first leg of the flight is fairly empty. Passengers are scattered around the jumbo jet's 400 seats. After takeoff, the bomber is able to move. He chooses seat 26K, located directly over the center fuel tank in some 747s. The cabin is tended by stewardess Maria de la Cruz. She flies domestic routes and has worked for Philippine Airlines for 1 year.
Can I get you some juice or coffee?
Juice, please.
Now the bomber must find a vacant lavatory to assemble the explosive device. Arming the bomb only takes minutes, but requires total concentration. The final step is setting the timer so it will explode in 4 hours' time, long after he leaves the plane. He hides the bomb in the life jacket pocket underneath his seat. He then changes seats. When she returns, Maria de la Cruz notices that the roving passenger has moved seats again. She will remember that he left his breakfast untouched, and that the rest of the flight passed uneventfully. As Philippine Airlines Flight 434 begins its final approach into Cebu, more passengers are getting ready to board the aircraft that will take them onwards to Tokyo.
Cabin crew, prepare for landing. Cabin doors to automatic.
PAL 434 lands in Cebu at 6:50 a.m. and several of the passengers disembark, including the terrorist with the alias Amaldo Forlani.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Maria de la Cruz will also leave Flight 434. A new cabin crew will take over for the 4.5-hour flight to Tokyo. "256 new passengers board the 747 that arrived from Manila. Many of the passengers in this cabin are Japanese. Among them is 24-year-old engineer Haruki Ikegami. He's looking forward to getting home to Tokyo after his first trip overseas. Airport congestion delays the departure by 38 minutes, but the timer on the bomb under seat 26K continues to tick. "8:30 a.m., December the 11th, 1994. All passengers for Philippine Airlines Flight 434 are now on board for the leg to Tokyo. None of them is aware that 2 hours earlier, a terrorist planted a time bomb under one of their seats. Steward Fernando Bayot is assisting passengers in the forward cabin on this 4.5-hour flight. At 8:38, PAL 434 is cleared for takeoff. On the flight deck, Captain Ed Reyes is assisted by First Officer Jaime Herrera and Systems Engineer Dexter Comendador. Reyes and Comendador are both former Air Force pilots. Haruki Ikegami is seated in 26K, the seat occupied by the bomber earlier on the first leg of Flight 434 from Manila to Cebu. Several passengers in this cabin are co-workers, traveling with a Japanese tour group, including Keisuke Aoki and Masaharu Mochizuki.
After takeoff, everything seemed normal. We were flying at 10,000 meters. I was reading a magazine, then the meal was served. After eating, I went to sleep.
31-year-old Yukihiko Usui stayed up all night on the last day of his trip, and he's ready to nap after breakfast. He's sitting in row 27, one row behind the seat vacated by the bomber 4 hours earlier.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. It's a beautiful day in Tokyo, sunny and 26 degrees. I expect we'll be landing at Narita Airport in 2 hours' time.
2 hours into the flight, PAL 434 is cruising on autopilot 10,000 meters above Minami Daito Island, southern Japan. To ease the pilot's workload, the autopilot remains on throughout the flight, keeping the aircraft on a constant heading and altitude.
God forgive me. That was my inner thought, you know. God forgive me. I think I'm going to die now. Then after that, I have to do what I had to do.
Oh, I've lost control. I have control. Dex, check the pressurization loss. Be prepared.
Check the QRH for...
Although the autopilot instantly corrects the aircraft's bank to the right, the effect of the blast is far from over.
There was a loud bang which woke me up. I could feel the plane expanding from the pressure. I saw smoke as well as debris falling like powder.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay in your seat.
The injured people were trying to get away from the area where the bomb was.
I stood up and saw that a lot of people were bleeding. I thought my life was over.
Stay in your seat, please.
The cabin crew's first priority is to stop passengers leaving their seats. Yukihiko Usui is sitting in the row directly behind the explosion. Both his legs are badly wounded. Steward Fernando Bayot moves him away from the blast site.
Please sit down and fasten your seatbelt.
Bayot now turns his attention to Haruki Ikegami. He has been swallowed by the smoking hole where seat 26K used to be.
I saw this man, only his head and his arms were peering out of the hole, so I tried to pull him out.
After the struggle to lift him out, Bayot realizes that part of the lower half of Ikegami's body is missing. Within a couple of minutes, he dies. The cabin crew do not want Ikegami's death to panic passengers, so they pretend to minister to him. Bayot then reports to the captain.
Oh, Captain.
Okay. Keep the passengers calm. Make sure they stay in their seats. There's been an explosion in row 26. One dead and several injured, and the cabin's full of smoke. There's a hole in the floor. Go inspect the damage, Dex.
Yes, sir.
Reyes' first concern is that the blast could make a hole in the aircraft's skin. This would lead to sudden depressurization in the cabin and necessitate an emergency descent.
There was a huge gaping hole beside her, and if a small tear in the skin of the aircraft was, if there were a hole there, it most probably would open up and then pull us out of the aircraft. When I saw that there was no damage to the outer skin. I went up and reported to the captain while we assumed that the pressurization system would hold.
Immediately after the explosion, the co-pilot's steering wheel slams to the right, and the aircraft banks in the same direction. The autopilot immediately corrects the deviation, but soon Reyes discovers that the autopilot steering system is another victim of the blast.
Then I said, okay, I'm going to try to turn the airplane using the autopilot, but there was no reaction, whether I tried it to make it go down or up, or left and right turns, no reaction. I said, now we have a problem.
This is not Reyes' only problem. In the cabin, one of the injured passengers needs urgent medical attention. Tokyo is still 2.5 hours away, and Reyes decides to try and land at Naha Airport on the island of Okinawa, located 74 kilometers to the west. He orders the co-pilot to make a Mayday call.
Yes, sir. Naha, PAL 434, heavy declaring emergency. Explosion on board. We have casualties. Requesting emergency landing at Naha. We will need full emergency services on landing.
PAL 434, Naha, please repeat. Say again.
Naha, PAL 434, heavy declaring emergency. Explosion on board. We have casualties. Request emergency landing at Naha. We will need full emergency
Getting the Japanese air traffic controller to understand the emergency proves to be difficult.
Naha, Naha, Naha. This is Philippine Airlines 434, flight level 330. A bomb has exploded on board. Bravo, Oscar, Mike, Bravo. Bomb explosion. Request emergency landing at Naha.
And there was silence. Then the controller came in, another controller, an American. Okay, Philippine 434, I'm taking over.
The American air traffic controller is from an American base on Okinawa.
Turn left, heading.
No, I shot back. We cannot turn at this moment yet. We will tell you when we are starting to turn towards Naha. We have problems with our flight controls.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We will be making an early landing at Naha Airport in Okinawa. We'll be landing as soon as possible, so please remain in your seat with your seatbelt fastened.
But landing at Naha is easier said than done. The autopilot is not responding to any of Reyes' commands, and PAL 434 is heading straight past Okinawa. Reyes must find a way to steer if he is to have any chance of landing safely. But disengaging the autopilot might result in losing what minimal control he still has over the aircraft.
Okay. Let's keep the seatbelt sign on. When we disengage the autopilot, we might lose control, so be ready.
Since the autopilot won't react to any inputs that I make, I was scared if I disengage the autopilot, the aircraft might make a sudden bang to the right that we might not be able to control.
At a count of 3, I'll disengage. 1, 2, 3.
One, two, three. Nothing happened. And then there was, we were relieved.
I can't turn using the controls. Looks like the explosion jammed the aileron. Dex, what does the QRH say about jammed ailerons?
The QRH, or Quick Reference Handbook, is the pilot's Bible that lists procedures that must be followed in emergency situations.
Jammed flight controls. Use maximum force possible, including both pilots if required.
Okay. Let's force it.
Reyes tries brute force to activate the ailerons, the panels on each wing which turn the aircraft. Since the explosion, he can only fly straight.
Not getting anything from the ailerons. Can't get off this heading. All right. Okay. Re-engage the autopilot while I work out our options.
It's taking much longer to land than was announced.
We were told it would only be 20 minutes, but it was really 1 hour before we landed. It was very frightening.
Although they survived the bombing, passengers are now getting anxious about landing safely at Naha Airport.
Since there was so much time before landing, I started writing a will. I wrote the will to my son, telling him to be strong.
As PAL 434 looks like missing Naha Airport, Reyes comes up with another plan.
We got it turned. We'll have to use differential power. Disengage auto throttle. Pull back 3 and 4.
Captain Reyes increases thrust to the engines on the left-hand side of the plane and reduces power to the engines on the right. Very slowly, the aircraft starts to circle right. He then lowers his speed to make a smaller radius turn. With guidance from air traffic control, Reyes hopes that the maneuver will eventually line up with the runway at Naha.
So while we were descending on low speed, I tried to test the flight controls, and there are some little reactions.
The elevator is beginning to respond. Dex.
The elevator is a control that makes the plane ascend and descend.
250 knots. Flaps 1 on speed.
In order to land safely, Reyes will need at least minimal control over the elevator and rudder. As PAL 434 nears Naha, he continues to reduce his airspeed.
Flaps 10.
Flaps 10 set. Speed 225.
Okay, she's turning.
Sir, if we reduce our weight, we will be able to reduce our approach and landing speeds. Suggest we dump fuel.
Sige, magaling.
Reyes orders the systems engineer to dump 36 tons of fuel.
5 minutes, 20,000 pounds.
Less fuel means less strain on landing gear and brakes at touchdown.
Check.
I was terrified when I saw the smoke trail behind each wing. I thought something must be burning and there would be another explosion.
As the time to touchdown gets closer, Reyes worries that the bomb may have done more as yet unknown damage to the aircraft.
I'm not certain our landing gear will hold up. Strap yourself in. I'll grease the purser.
So he talked to the head of the cabin crew and he said, "We're not sure if the gears will go down. And in case the gears collapse while landing, be ready to evacuate."
It's either you make it or you die. That's because you cannot do anything anymore.
Runway in sight.
With only minimal control over the aircraft, Reyes faces the most challenging landing of his career. "10,000 meters above the Pacific Ocean on a flight from the Philippines to Tokyo, a terrorist bomb cripples the flight controls of a jumbo jet. As PAL 434 starts its final approach, the 292 people on board are pinning their hopes of survival on the skill of Captain Ed Reyes.
I know everybody was scared. We are all scared. I know that.
Gear down.
The gears were supposed to come down a few seconds, but that was the longest second. Because we were waiting for the greens to come on.
Take a long time.
It took a long time. It was a long few seconds until when it locked.
3 greens, sir.
Okay. I'm disconnecting the autopilot and landing manually, okay? Dex, monitor my descent rate, call altitude and speed. Flaps 30.
Okay, 500 feet on course.
Flaps 30 set.
Help me with the elevator. When I say push, I want you to push.
Okay, 200 slightly left.
Correcting. Push.
100. 50. 30. Power off.
Your last command was pull.
Yeah, my last command was pull.
I made sure that the throttles were closed because he might give a go around and I would make sure that we would stay on the ground.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. We'd like to thank you for your cooperation and your patience. Emergency crews are on their way. We'll try and get you out of here as soon as possible. Thank you.
The Philippine Airlines 747 is now a crime scene under Japanese jurisdiction. As investigators from the Okinawa Police Department set out to solve the mystery of what happened, they turn their attention first to the dead man in seat 26K. The forensic pathologist recovered 94 fragments embedded in Ikegami's buttocks by the explosion. He suffered severe internal injuries and massive loss of blood. But tragic as it was, the effects of the explosion could have been much worse.
If the explosion had been sideways, it would have blown a hole in the plane and caused an air pressure problem. In a sense, it was good that the blast was vertical. But we have to remember the victim. He died to save the rest of us.
Ikegami's body bore the brunt of the upward blast, but the explosion severed the steel cables in the ceiling that control the rudder and elevator. The charge also severed the co-pilot's control cable to the right aileron, one of the control surfaces on the wing which make an aircraft bank and turn. The downward force blew a hole in the floor and could have ignited the vapors in the center fuel tank, creating a catastrophic explosion. But by chance, on December the 11th, seat 26K was not located above the tank.
Fortunately for us, we took a different version, the SAS version of the 747 that day. And that specific seat for that version was 2 seats forward of the center tank.
The Okinawa forensic investigators immediately start work collecting evidence from the bomb site. They begin with the largest fragments of debris and then systematically work down until the smallest particles are retrieved by vacuum cleaner. Japanese investigators cannot identify the bomb's detonator. But by separating out bits of metal, plastic, and electrical wire that do not belong to the plane, components of the bomb are pieced together. One forensic investigator is able to identify the bomb's timer. By reconstituting dozens of burnt fragments, he discovers it's a modified digital wristwatch. Investigators also discover that one of the bomb's 9-volt batteries is only sold in the Philippines. It's another clue that suggests that the bomber could be based there. Philippine National Police Deputy Chief Sonny Raisin is on the case.
In the later part of 1994, we already started to receive information, intelligence reports, that there were Middle Eastern personalities that were here already in the Philippines.
On the night of January the 6th, 1995, almost 4 weeks after the bombing of PAL 434, the Philippine police get a lucky break. In his Manila apartment, the PAL 434 bomber has enlisted the help of an accomplice to mass-produce his new undetectable bomb. An attempt to burn off chemicals gets out of hand. Acrid-smelling smoke spills out of the apartment. It attracts the attention of the doorman, who comes to investigate.
What's going on? Sorry. We're playing with some fireworks, but it's okay. We put them out and we have all the windows open inside and we keep the door closed. It'll be fine, okay?
You all open the door.
No, if we open the door, the smoke comes in the hallway. You keep it closed to go out the window, okay? Come on. It's okay. It's okay.
Until the smoke dissipates, the bombers decide to wait outside the apartment. The doorman isn't convinced by their playing with fireworks story, and he calls the fire department and the police. By the time the firemen come, the smoke is gone, and they leave after a quick check. The bomber now realizes he's left a very sensitive item in the apartment, and he persuades his friend to retrieve his laptop.
He was too clever a guy to come back and expose himself, because all along he knew that that would be too risky for him to go back and be caught.
The bomber's fear of getting caught is justified. Once Police Inspector Ada Farescal learns that they're from Pakistan, she insists on seeing their room for herself. The police in Manila are on high alert due to a planned visit by the Pope in a few days. What Inspector Farescal finds confirms her worst fears about the intentions of the tenants.
You know. You! Stop!
The shot distracts the apprentice and he trips over a fallen palm tree. But the cop discovers he has no handcuffs. The doorman improvises with the drawstrings of his windbreaker. In the meantime, the bomber vanishes. One of the first senior officers to arrive at his apartment is Sonny Raisin.
Incident at Doña Josepa apartment was the breakthrough in opening our eyes that the Al-Qaeda terrorist cell was already operating here in the Philippines.
The Philippine National Police know they've stumbled onto something big, and they inform Interpol, Scotland Yard, and the FBI. When news of the raid reaches the Joint Terrorism Task Force in New York, it immediately grabs the attention of FBI Special Agent Frank Pellegrino. For 2 years, he has been hunting a terrorist called Ramzi Youssef, and it looks as if this might be his man.
Well, he was always our focus since '93. I mean, at the time, that was he was the biggest fugitive around.
As Philippine police comb through the apartment, they begin to find more evidence tying Youssef to the bombing of PAL 434.
There was a similarity between the watches that were found in the apartment and the type of watch that was used in Okinawa. Putting together that watch, that was the watch that was on the bomb, on that Flight 434, and identifying those pieces eventually as a Casio watch, it was amazing.
Youssef is a skilled forger. Investigators find several identification cards bearing various names, and photos in each of which he looks quite different. One ID card is of particular interest.
So, almost as a dig to us, the ID card used the First World Trade Center bombing date as the date that the card was issued. So we knew right away it was Youssef that had been in the apartment. They knew chemicals. The chemical dictionary was a very well-used item, underlined, highlighted, well-read, notations throughout the book, something that he used quite often. And I don't remember the exact number. I think there might have been 100 latent prints found on that belonged to him. They knew electronics. The way that the timing device was hidden inside the Casio watch just made the whole thing very concealable and very worrisome.
The identification of the bomber of PAL 434 and the discovery of his bomb factory is very disturbing news for those responsible for airline passenger safety. Ramzi Youssef is an international terrorist who knows how to get his bombs past airport security. Bombs that are small, but if strategically located, can blow up a jumbo jet and kill not just one, but hundreds of people. And the bomber of PAL 434 is still on the loose. The Philippine National Police have stumbled on the hideout of an international terrorist. the FBI identify him as Ramzi Youssef. Evidence that Amaldo Forlani, the man who planted the bomb on PAL 434, is the same person as Ramzi Youssef, comes from the travel agent who sold him the Philippine Airlines ticket. Ramzi Youssef is just one of several aliases of a man who tops the FBI's most wanted list. An international terrorist with a $2 million bounty on his head. Youssef, whose real name is probably Abdul Karim Basit, was born and raised in Kuwait, where his father worked as an engineer. It was there that he met the friend that he enlisted to help him in the Manila bomb factory. When he was 18, Youssef's family returned to their Pakistan homeland. Youssef married and had 2 children. Soon after returning home, his parents sent him to study in Britain.
He was taking classes both in engineering and in using the computer, so he definitely had some talent.
In summer breaks from college in the late 1980s, Youssef returns to Pakistan. He puts his new engineering skills to use by teaching bomb making to militants in training camps near Peshawar, Pakistan. These camps are fertile ground for making contacts with militants worldwide. In September 1992, Youssef flies from Pakistan to New York to prepare for a major terrorist attack. On arrival at JFK, he presents a fake Iraqi passport and asks for political asylum from Saddam Hussein. The ploy works and he's allowed to enter the country. 6 months later, on February 26, 1993, one of the largest homemade bombs in American history explodes in the garage below the World Trade Center, killing 6 people, injuring hundreds, and causing $500 million worth of damage. That night, Youssef is on a plane back to his home in Pakistan.
He was an action figure. He wanted to keep doing things. He wasn't happy with the one success he had.
18 months after the World Trade Center attack, Youssef flies to Manila to fine-tune the bomb that he plants on PAL 434. According to Sunny Raisin, the Philippine capital suits him.
Ramzi Youssef loved to enjoy life. He is a ladies' man. He associated himself with a lot of girlfriends, and he liked to party. He also drank a lot, see, and he enjoyed the life. Terrorists, they are your normal day-to-day people, the guy next door.
After the bombing of PAL 434, Youssef arranges for his childhood friend Abdul Hakim Murad to assist him in Manila. But on January 6, 1995, 2 weeks after his arrival, Murad is arrested and sent to the Philippine police headquarters for interrogation. It took 67 days to extract the details of how Youssef planted the bomb.
My impressions of him was that he was strong-willed, he was determined. Initially, he did not break down in questioning. And it was only when the FBI team that came in and provided us with additional information or pieces of the puzzle that we did not have, that he started to talk.
Tiny chemical traces of the explosive were found on PAL 434, and Murad eventually admits that Youssef uses liquid nitroglycerin that he's stabilized and concealed in a bottle of contact lens solution. Murad also reveals that Youssef hid the bomb's potentially suspicious components in the heel of his shoes. Most airport security systems only detect metal above the ankles.
I bet you he was cool as could be. He was somewhat cavalier in his attitude towards these explosives and chemicals. To carry a container of nitroglycerin on an airplane, you know, gotta be a little nuts.
Murad's confession provides details of Youssef's actions after he successfully got the bomb components past airport security.
Can I get you some juice or coffee?
geospace.
Youssef designed the device so the innocent-looking components can be quickly transformed into a lethal bomb. Youssef has modified a digital wristwatch as the bomb's timer. This is wired to a detonator inside the bottle of nitroglycerin. Two 9-volt batteries provide an additional electric charge to the exposed filament of a light bulb that will spark the explosion. Youssef sets the alarm for 4 hours later, when he anticipates the plane will be flying high over the Pacific Ocean. Youssef plants the bomb in a life vest pouch under his seat, a place ground crews are unlikely to inspect during the stopover in Cebu. Soon after, he gets off the plane and disappears. Four hours later, the time bomb under seat 26K awakes the airline industry to a new kind of terrorism. Murad's confession confirms Pellegrino's suspicions. This is just the kind of sophisticated plot he has come to expect from Ramzi Youssef. But Pellegrino is still shocked by what Murad says next. PAL 434 was only a test, a dry run for a much larger terrorist plot that will kill thousands of airline passengers. A highly skilled terrorist, Ramzi Youssef, has already set off a new type of bomb on an aircraft. Now the FBI discovers Youssef wants to blow up more planes. And he continues to evade capture. FBI investigators find evidence of Youssef's meticulous planning on secret files on the laptop that he so desperately wanted his accomplice to retrieve.
On the laptop computer found in the Josepha apartment building was a file which laid out a plan for 5 individuals using code names, individuals not mentioned on the plan, to board about 3 planes each, 2 planes, a couple of people had 3 planes, planting bombs on the planes, and then returning back to their home. Hoping when they planted the bombs and with the timing devices, if everything went well, all bombs would go off within about a 6-hour time period. Any more than one would have been an airline disaster. So, if they were 50% successful in their plan, I think it would have scared a lot of people for a long time.
The file on Youssef's laptop reveals that the plan, codenamed Bojinka, is foiled with no time to spare. The bombing of 12 American planes is meant to kill 4,000 passengers. Youssef's campaign of terror against the airlines is scheduled to start less than 2 weeks after the bust of his bomb factory in Manila. By the time Pellegrino and the FBI team arrive in the Philippines, Youssef is long gone.
So it was a worry and it was a missed opportunity. But we also, on a lot of these fugitive type cases, we're all not that different and everybody goes home. Everybody needs to go home. And so the investigation again would focus back to Pakistan.
The FBI immediately begin a publicity campaign in Pakistan, promoting their $2 million reward for assistance in arresting Youssef. The strategy works. Youssef's latest recruit for yet another airline bombing blows the whistle. On the day Youssef is due to leave his hotel in Islamabad, a Pakistani SWAT team moves in. In Yusuf's room are Delta and United Airlines flight schedules, as well as bomb components hidden in children's toys.
Who are you? Do you have a warrant?
The informer receives the $2 million bounty for the tip-off which prevents yet another airline attack.
He was shocked. Did not think he would be caught. He had a certain confidence about him, and I didn't think he thought we'd ever catch up to him.
Within hours of his capture, Yusuf is extradited from Pakistan and put on a waiting US government plane. With the cooperation of the Japanese and Philippine governments, the FBI arranged for Yusuf to stand trial in New York City for the PAL 434 bombing, as well as the earlier 1993 attack on the World Trade Center.
In a convoy of federal and local patrol cars, Ramzi Ahmed Yusuf was brought into New York City late Wednesday night, ending a worldwide manhunt. He was arrested Tuesday in Pakistan by Pakistani authorities and brought back by the FBI on a U.S. plane, then into custody with heavy security on the street in case of any terrorist attacks prompted by his arrest.
At his trial a year later in New York's Southern District Court, Yusuf decides to handle his own defense against the advice of the judge. He performs better than expected, but he's found guilty on all charges related to the bombing of PAL 434 and conspiring to bomb 12 American passenger planes. Yusuf is also found guilty in a second trial for the World Trade Center bombing. In his final summing up, Yusuf justifies his actions.
Yes, I am a terrorist and proud of it. And I only support terrorism so long as it's against the United States government and against Israel, because you are more than terrorists.
Although Pakistani, Yusuf describes himself as Palestinian by choice. And he justifies the PAL 434 and World Trade Center bombings as punishment for a US foreign policy that favors Israel over Palestine.
And hypocrites!
For both crimes, he's sentenced to 240 years in prison. The judge recommends solitary confinement for life in the most secure prison in the United States, located in Florence, Colorado. It houses the country's most violent and dangerous prisoners, and it's where Yusuf will spend the rest of his life, confined in a cell for up to 23 out of every 24 hours.
We cannot afford to just sit down and count our victories with the arrest of Ramzi Yusuf. Somebody else has already replaced him, and somebody else is already thinking of how to circumvent these security measures that we've put up.
In the year following Yusuf's attack on PAL 434, the Federal Aviation Administration certified a machine to detect explosives. Not one American carrier bought it. Only after 9/11 was a law passed that required US airports to deploy explosive detection systems. But the most reliable models are expensive or too slow and still not widely employed.
Well, it was the old saying that we have to be right 100% of the time. Terrorist only has to be right once.
Although there hasn't been a successful airliner bombing since PAL 434, those who forget the past may be destined to revisit it.